Welcome to Zero Knowledge, a podcast where we explore the latest in blockchain technology and the decentralized web. The show is hosted by me, Anna.
And me, Frederick. In this week's episode, Anna sits down with Jorge from Aragon to discuss his work on the project, the history of DAOs, and the challenges and potential of these new organizational entities.
Before we start, we want to say thank you to this week's sponsor, Apograf. Apograf's platform is designed to break down barriers, reward researchers, and promote open science. Institutions and for-profit publications put a high price tag on much of the world's best research, even when that research is funded by the public. This hinders professional communication, it constrains data analysis, and it slows the rate of scientific progress as a whole. To counter this, Apograf has built an extensive collection of open access research papers on cryptography, distributed computer systems, and blockchain. If you are a researcher who'd be interested in having a profile in such a system, or if you'd like to subscribe to a specific researcher's work, please check out welcome.apograf.io. We've added the link in the show notes. So thank you again, Apograf. Now here is our interview with Jorge. So today I'm sitting with Jorge from Aragon 1, and we're going to be talking a little bit about Aragon, the structure of Aragon, the Aragon Courts, all sorts of cool stuff. And I think Jorge is an amazing guest to have on to also touch on the topic sort of generally of DAOs, something we haven't really covered that much. There is one episode that we did do on the DAO with Griff Green, which I'll put in the show notes. That might be an interesting one to check out before this one. But anyway, Jorge, welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Anna. Super excited.
Jorge, what are you working on?
I'm one of the co-founders of the Aragon project and currently work at Aragon 1, which is one of the teams working on Aragon.
Cool. What is Aragon?
Aragon is a project that is making decentralized organizations happen. So the Aragon client is this way to create and manage decentralized organizations, but we're also working on the Aragon network that we call it like a digital jurisdiction for DAOs in a way, which is providing sovereign DAOs with some of the services that they wouldn't get from not being a part of the traditional legal system.
Cool. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, what were you doing before this?
So before this, Luis and I used to be an iOS app developer, and I had multiple jobs doing this. At some point, I stopped working for the company I was working for, and I was back in Madrid thinking about what to do next. And my co-founder Luis, he was also moving away from his current company, and he told me about this idea that he had for a company, and we immediately teamed up on it, and we moved over to Silicon Valley to kind of work on it and fundraise for the idea. That idea was kind of shifted quite a bit, and we ended up building like this crowdfunding platform to fight patent trolls.
Oh, wow.
So if there was like bad patents that could be used to harm companies, that you have a patent because you bought it from a company that was going bankrupt, or directly having companies that file totally stupid patents, that can then take that patent and try to extort other companies that do something barely related to what says in the patent. So we were building a crowdfunding platform for that, and we like to take down specific patents, and we figured that or the people that wanted to use it weren't that interested in like throwing down specific patents because they never knew what type of patent, like what specific patent could hurt them, and they wanted insurance. And at that point, we started playing around with the idea of building an insurance vehicle directly on Ethereum.
Oh, wow.
And we went pretty down the rabbit hole, and that was super, super interesting. But apparently like launching an insurance vehicle has like a lot of like making the thing work on Ethereum was like not super hard, but then there was like a lot of other things. And at that point we had gotten ourselves like very familiar with Ethereum, and we decided to convert it into what today is Aragon and focus on that.
Okay, so now let's talk about Aragon. What year is this? What year did you start thinking about Aragon?
Yeah, this was the fall of 2016.
Okay. Did you write a white paper? Did you do kind of the classic?
Yeah, I mean, when we started thinking very seriously about the idea, we did some brainstorming, and then Luis started writing a white paper. But right until actually the first white paper was very interesting because it was kind of like a product spec in a way. It was like, okay, we want to do this decentralized organization things, and what are the features that we need? Okay, we need identity for the people here. We need a way to have shares or token management to give people economic interest in the organization. We need a way to track finances. And so it was like, okay, these are the things that we would need. But then immediately we set out to build the product, the first prototype. And we did that in like 3 months. We were to a point that we were comfortable with this and kind of showed it to the world. We put it on the our Ethereum Reddit, and that was super fun. And then like a month after that, we launched the product, the first alpha, and people were already using it. So that original white paper was kind of just okay, this is the motivation behind the idea, and this is how we can do it, and we can do it now.
But you actually proved it a little bit more with this MVP. Okay, so what did you do next? When did you do the sale?
The sale was in later, like the next year, like in May.
May 2018.
2017. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good timing.
Yeah.
What was that like?
Yeah, I mean, the moment before the sale, because at the end of the day, we wrote the smart contract for managing the sale. And that was like, when it started, we had like our monitoring tools. So we could see how it was going. But the 10 minutes before that, people were already trying to contribute to it. It started getting very, very stressful. And the days leading up to it, it was like a lot of work. But yeah, it ended up going well. We didn't get hacked. Everything moved smoothly. People got their tokens, and actually a lot of people told us, because there were already a lot of crazy sales going on, like nothing as it would go after, but it was like a pretty boring sale. Like everything just worked. People got their tokens, and that was it.
How much did you guys raise?
$25 million
back then. It was lower, I guess, back then, eh?
Yeah, ETH was at $90 back then. Yeah, ETH was at $90 back then.
So then you had funds. Mm-hmm. What I've never really understood what Aragon is exactly. So yeah, why don't we start with like, what is the toolkit?
So at the top level, there's the Aragon project and / the Aragon network, as different people call it, which is like a project or a DAO with the mission of making decentralized organizations happen. So anyone in the world can use this technology. And for this, we the main product that we built, the Aragon client, which is the tool, the web app that people use to create and manage these organizations. So that's like the main product that we built. And this gets built by different teams. We had this idea from the early beginning that we didn't want to, it doesn't really make sense to have a centralized team in charge of this decentralized technology. If something were to happen to the team, someone should be able to carry the torch forward. So we decided to, rather than just growing one organization horizontally and hire a lot of people, to have multiple teams working on the project that can have different tackle problems from different angles. We're all working for the core product. So Aragon One, the team that I work for, we're 17 people right now, and we kind of want to get it to 25 maximum. We don't really want one team to be massive. We might very much rather have like 3 teams as we have right now, with a smaller number of people, than just one big organization that becomes harder to manage and to.
What I don't fully get here is like, how would you fund other teams? Are the other teams also funded by the same, from the same pool? Mm-hmm. Okay.
So there's the on top right now, in charge of the project, there's this top level entity that's the Aragon Association.
Okay.
This is the entity that owns the funds of the project, and it's in charge of basically giving money to different teams and different projects so that the mission of Aragon gets carried away. For the Aragon Association, we have this process that we call the AGP process, which is the Aragon Governance Proposals, and this was created in November 2018. That's when AGP1, the AGP that governs how these AGPs work, was voted in by ANT holders, and this establishes the process by which every 3 months there's an Aragon network vote in which people can propose anything that they want to do with the project or across just for different tracks. One of them is finance, which is, okay, let's fund this team or let's fund this project. Others are like association, which is like more for the policies of the organization, or like a proclamation, which is like the network saying, okay, this is like the official party of the network. So in this way, when teams want to apply for funding, they just create an AGP, and then the AGP gets put out to a vote by ANT holders. And if ANT holders approve it, then the Aragon Association will take care of executing that proposal.
Who's in the association? Like, does the association also hold? Since they hold a lot, do they get to vote as well?
No, the association doesn't vote.
Okay, it doesn't vote.
No, the association has a bunch of ANT as well, but the association doesn't participate in AGPs.
Okay, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
The idea of a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization, in the case of Aragon, seems to permeate through like every level. It's not only there's a tool set for you to build a DAO, but the DAO tool set is built by a DAO.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that kind of goes all the way up.
Yeah, and we operate with all our tools. We're the first ones to use them. The whole AGP process is run on Aragon, and then the different teams that work for the project. For example, Aragon One, which is like a normal company. We use Aragon for managing or the company, like the day-to-day operations, like directly from the DAO. Even if it's like there's a legal entity that is responsible for that, we're still using the product for that.
Is there an Aragon 2? Or is there, like, we sort of mentioned there's an association and then there's Aragon 1, but who are the other groups? Or are they are there open slots there?
Yeah, the other groups that are right now, they're called Autark, which is this team led by Jalda. And then there's Aragon Black.
Aragon Black.
Yeah.
Okay. So there's already like 3 groups, and they've received their funding from the AGP process.
Yeah.
And is there like a runway, I guess, for each one of these?
Yeah, so each team can create their own proposal, and how it's been working ad hoc for new teams is that they've been requesting funding for 6 months. And then after that 6 months are over, they will do another funding proposal. So for example, with Autark, they got 6 months of funding in the Aragon Network Vote number 1 in January, and then in the Network Vote 3 in July, they requested 1 year of funding, and they got approved.
Okay, cool. Okay, so we have these, so I can kind of see this. You have an overarching association. You have the 3 groups underneath. Is each one of these groups building like a client? Are they all building the same thing? How does, like, maybe start with like, what is Aragon 1 building?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, Aragon 1 was, a year ago, it was really the only team. So a year ago, we were building basically everything. And right now, what we are mostly focused on is building the client itself and the core applications for running organizations. So that goes from the onboarding to client. And so we're working on that quite a bit. We're also leading the development of the Aragon Network and the Aragon Court right now. But yeah, we collaborate a lot with Autark, especially on the client side. And then Aragon Black right now, it's mostly focused on Aragon fundraising, which is this application to allow DAOs to directly fundraise themselves.
What's Autark building?
Autark, they're building this super interesting set of apps that's called Open Enterprise now. So these are like 4 or 5 apps that you get to install in your organization, and you can manage bounties directly in the organization. They also built this voting application with a different voting mechanism in which people can not only vote on binary decisions, but say like express their preference for different options with basically percentages, and then that can lead to many people voting and splitting money proportionally for many initiatives or issues. And we have a team that is running their own bounties for GitHub issues on Open Enterprise right now. So that's pretty exciting. And then they're also doing a bunch of infrastructure work for in the client and leading some of the efforts behind identity. And now they're going to tackle finance. It's
Are all of these dApps, or are they concepts? Like, are they kind of like legal? Are they kind of legal structures that are created, or are they all technology?
They're all technology. All technology. Yeah.
And are they all dApps?
They're kind of dApps that run inside the Aragon client.
Okay.
So we built Aragon in a pretty modular way, because rather than building for a very specific type of organization structure, like other projects do, like, okay, this is a way that we think that people want to organize, or that we want to organize, and we're going to build this code specifically for this. We took a modular approach, and we were like, we're not sure how people are going to want to organize, but we know that this is the way that we could model it, so that other people could build any governance model on top of this and decide how to build their organization, kind of like Legos. Mm-hmm. So for this, we created this kind of module system inside the Aragon client, so developers can build their own Aragon applications. So when we launched, we had like these 3 core apps. So there's like voting, tokens for membership, and finance to manage like the organization assets. But then, for example, now Aragon Black has worked on fundraising, and they can just build like that app, and then organizations can add that app to their org, and they take an organization that just had like very basic functionality, and now it can fundraise. And they could also install like Open Enterprise and start giving out work to a bunch of open source contributors. So it's kind of this modular approach in which people get to really build the organization however they want, without involving writing any code, or as minimum code as possible.
But does it live on Ethereum still? Because like Ant is an ERC20.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm just kind of curious, are these all like smart contracts, or are these like web applications that are kind of linked a little bit to a blockchain?
No, so these are like they're kind of like little dApps that live within Aragon. They have a smart contract component that is using Aragon OS, and it's part of the organization. And then there's like also the front end component of the dApp. So kind of what it looks like, it's like you get it on the sidebar with all the apps that the organization has, and you can just add different apps. So it's kind of like a little app store for organizations.
Okay. So now I think we have a bit of a picture of the Aragon world and some of the products. Is Aragon also doing advocacy, or some sort of like, are you guys working on like understanding legality of some of these systems, or like developing the contracts that would work in them as well?
So we're like, none of the Aragon teams are directly working on this as a product that we provide. We don't want to turn ourselves into a law firm. That would really that would really suck. But there are people from the community that are already like linking Aragon organizations to real world entities. This project called OpenESQ, that they opened up the first LLC that was actually controlled by a DAO like early this year. So that was the first time that we saw a DAO become like a control a legal entity. So that was pretty exciting. But this is something that we're not really working towards, at least at Aragon 1.
So Aragon as a network also has this Nest program and this Flock program. Is that the same as the AGPs that you were mentioning before?
So the Flock program is what we were talking before about different teams that work on Aragon getting funding. That's Flock, and it goes through the AGP process. And then we have Nest, which is our grants program for smaller projects of people working on cool things on Aragon or Ethereum.
So those the Nest program is also for projects maybe that aren't in any way working on DAOs, but just happen to use a DAO, or projects that you think are useful for the ecosystem?
Yeah, so when we started with Nest, we did give more grants to more general Ethereum infrastructure. For example, we gave a grant to Prismatic Labs that was working then like on Ethereum sharding, and now it's working on the ETH2 on their own ETH2 client. And a bunch of other Ethereum infrastructure, like a native transaction signer for the desktop. But now we're like the last grants that we've given are to people working on cool things on Aragon. So, for example, there's this project that I'm helping out that they're calling it Empower the DAO. So they use like this piece on Aragon DAO that's called the agent that allows it to interact with other protocols. And they're building an integration with Compound so that the DAO can lend its assets on Compound and also Uniswap or Manatee and SMs. So we're having like these projects building integrations or cool stuff. For example, there's Level K building a Futarchy app for Aragon. So that's super, super exciting.
Let's talk now a bit more generally about DAOs, because I mean, Aragon is a project in itself, but there are other DAOs out there. And I'm really curious kind of like what you make of it. So why don't we start off with like a really mini history of DAOs and like where you see it starting and maybe some examples along the way.
Yeah. I think you can take it back to like and talk about how Bitcoin is kind of a DAO, because it's like totally autonomous organization that is not run by anyone in particular. So it's centralized and it kind of has a mission to continue producing blocks and secure blocks. And you have people all over the world working for this DAO to secure the network. So I think that's kind of a real DAO, but I think the DAO that made the term well known was like the DAO, the DAO in 2016. So yeah, this was a very, very interesting DAO. It was like a for-profit vehicle that acted kind of as a VC on the blockchain. So it raised a bunch of money. Then everyone got super excited. It got to raise a crazy amount, and because everyone was so excited, the price of ETH was also going up. It had some game theoretical issues that some people pointed out in the DAO moratorium, and people were not even voting in proposals because they were a bit scared about these issues that were being pointed out. And eventually it was like someone posted on Reddit, I think the DAO is getting drained. And it was indeed getting drained because of a bug that there was in the DAO, in the code that allowed people to kind of create their own child DAOs to live the DAO. So yeah. This was in the summer of 2016 that then led to the whole Ethereum Classic drama and the fork. So yeah, I think then after that the term DAO got like a bit of a bad rep. But I think like especially this year is when we're starting to see that people are being way more open and excited about DAOs again. And I think that's really really cool, and I think it's only gonna increase in the next few years when people are like, when we start getting again big DAOs with a lot of people being like big entities in the space.
What are some examples of DAOs today that you think are kind of exciting? Like either projects that sit on a DAO or that are in themselves just a DAO?
Yeah, I mean, I think ourselves is one of the best examples of a DAO operating as in a centralized way. Then there's like projects like Moloch that a lot of people are excited about, which is kind of like a grant DAO in which like people have donated some money there and are coordinating around different goals that they want to accomplish.
Is Moloch built using Aragon stuff, or is it like, did they build it themselves?
Yeah, Moloch took the approach of building it themselves in like they wanted a a very simple mechanism that worked for their particular mission of what they wanted to do, and they built it custom code to do that, but just in a very specific way, which has the issue that if you want to use it for slightly different thing, you probably need to end up rewriting a lot of the code. But I think it's good that for that particular use case, they came up with a pretty interesting mechanism, and we're actually now building some of the ideas that Moloch implemented and building them as modules that Aragon DAOs can use.
And then was Metacartel, that is a fork of Moloch. And they did some changes, I guess, to that as well, or just the numbers.
I think they're using the exact same same code base, but yeah, it's a pretty similar idea for the DAO.
What about something like DXDAO or DX? Is that how you say it? DXDAO?
I think so. Yeah.
Do you know anything about?
I haven't followed it super closely, but I think the idea is that there was this exchange that exchange, and they handed over the control to this DAO, and it's in charge of deciding what tokens to get listed and some other decisions about this change. I'm not a member of the DAO myself. I
remember I had a friend who pinged me and was like super excited about it. It was like, wow, look at this in action. It's like, it actually has voting, and like there's a huge percentage of people participating, and it's super decentralized. But then I also heard that like after a bit of time, there was like a form of centralization or cartel-like behavior that formed. And maybe this can actually, like, this is something I think it would be really good for us to talk about. Like, what does it mean to game a DAO?
Well, there are many ways that you can game a DAO. The most terrible attack, the one that I'm the most scared about, is 51% attacks. So the way that this works is, imagine that you have an organization in which you have simple majority voting for doing anything. So if there's a vote and the majority of the organization agrees to do something, it has total control over the organization. So send all the money somewhere else. So you can have someone malicious that, if anyone can create proposals and there's nothing at stake, that says, okay, I propose that we move all of this money in the organization to a smart contract that is going to split all the money in the organization between everyone that votes yes in the proposal.
Oh.
So with zero cost to the attacker, you can have this way to disrupt the organization. And as a voter, you're not risking anything. Like, if anything, if the attack happens and it actually passes and you didn't vote for it, you're actually you're getting burned. So the rational thing may be to just vote yes. In that way, you're voting to kind of distract the organization. And this is the crazy thing, is that it has like totally zero cost to the attacker. And this is something that cannot happen in the real world in illegal companies, because you have fiduciary responsibilities, and if someone were to do that, then there would be people that go to jail or that would be in deep trouble. But with decentralized organizations, you cannot really act after the fact. If someone does this attack, then that's it. The money has moved, and you cannot really stop this. So this is a problem that we're working on solving with this concept called proposal agreements. So the idea is that organizations could have subjective rules for what proposals are valid and which proposals are invalid, and also try to encode what the values and the mission of the organization is. And this is something that you really don't want to write in code. So you write that down in English or whatever language, and then when people are making proposals, if someone doesn't think that proposal should be valid per the organization, they just don't think it's a bad proposal. It's like invalid. This is something that cannot happen. You cannot take the money, steal the money for a subset of members of the organization. That's just kind of illegal. So we have the Aragon, someone can challenge that and put it to the Aragon Court, which is a network of bureaus that will look at the evidence, they will look at what the rules for the organization are, and make a subjective judgment on whether that proposal was even valid in the first place.
Wait, this is the Aragon Court?
Yeah.
And you send this off to jurors. That's the terminology you're using there. Yeah. Interesting. So what's the court?
So there's this, the Aragon Court is a protocol of the Aragon network. So the idea of the court is have a way to do dispute resolution on subjective issues. Like, does this proposal follow the rules of the organization for making proposals? Because there's a lot of subjective judgment in running an organization that just like it's impossible for a smart contract to see. Like a proposal to move all the money of the organization because there's a bug and we want to move it somewhere else, and a proposal to move all the money to this contract that splits it between all the attackers.
Looks the same.
It's exactly the same. Yeah. It's just the intent and what's behind it, and this is something that a computer cannot compute and make a decision. So this is why we have to include this subjective mechanism with the Aragon Court. There's like a very simple protocol in which you have a set of jurors that are taking the court, and every time that there's a dispute, a random set of jurors get sampled and they're asked, okay, what do you think? How do you think this should go? Is it valid or invalid? They vote. There's a period in which everyone can appeal the decision and get more jurors involved. But if there are no appeals, then that decision gets made and gets sent back to the organization saying, okay, this proposal is valid or invalid.
Who is the jurors? Like, are they just token holders or?
Well, the jurors are people that want to work for this, so they stake tokens and become jurors, and they have a risk of being slashed, and if they don't support the winning ruling of a dispute, so yeah, they're just people that want to work on this.
They get slashed if they don't support a winning ruling. Do you think can the court be gamed?
So in the V1 of the court, there's this idea that we want to have kind of decision finality in a reasonable amount of time, because we don't want proposals like disputes just going over like months and months. So we have kind of this soft limit around 1 month in which we want to solve a dispute. So if a dispute starts getting appealed, there's just a number of appeal rounds that it can go over. And after that, there's like this final appeal round in which like all of the active jurors in the court get selected and asked, okay, this has gotten like very, very far into here, so we're just gonna get everyone involved because this may be
like a network affecting judgment.
Yeah. So with that, getting to that point is actually pretty expensive. In every appeal step, like two parties need to deposit collateral and different possible rulings. But if it gets to that point, it's like at the end, like just like what's the judgment of the entire network, and that if it gets to a point, it's very unlikely that the network would decide to not rule for the correct ruling if everyone was involved. But that would be like the most challenging part. But there's this research that we have been doing, and we'll probably not make it for V1, of rather than just resolving at that point, if people are still disagreeing with what the majority of the jurors in the court thought the ruling was, basically open a futurity market and say, okay, we have these two possible universes. There's the universe in which the court says the ruling was A, and this universe in which the ruling was B. What would be the price of A and T in both cases? And then a prediction market is open for both, and you take the universe in which the price of A and T would be greater, because the price of A and T should go down if the court is making bad rulings, because that will impact like future fees and jurors not joining the court. So yeah, that's something that will not make it for V1, but will make the court much less difficult to game.
Wow. And this is crazy that you've actually recreated a court system like this. Did you expect to be doing this when you were starting out?
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of obvious that if we really wanted to make sovereign DAOs really work, and these are DAOs that don't have a link to the real world. They're not really an LLC or a C corp that gets interacted with like this neat interface. They're really like the DAO only exists in code and in the like on the blockchain. That we would need some of these services that the real world has, and dispute resolution and arbitration is like a huge thing, because there's like so many subtleties that you just don't want to code into a smart contract. Not even that you could, but it's like really, really hard. So it was kind of obvious that if we really wanted these sovereign DAOs to exist, we need a way for resolving subjective disputes that come from people dealing with people.
But does this mean that there's now going to be like DAO lawyers?
Maybe. I hope that we make it simple, like that is simple enough so that people can just deal with it without having to involve lawyers. But yeah, it could definitely happen. People that specializes in just like writing this manifesto so that the court will understand, and then making the case to the court. Yeah.
Well, I mean, if you look back in history at how legal systems developed, like if you want to, look at ancient Rome or something, it started out quite simple. And then what would happen is there'd be an edge case, and then a new rule would be created and written down somewhere. And then that would happen over and over and over again. And then big shifts in like mood, or like there'd be new ideas that have flourished, and the laws that existed needed to be rewritten. And what you ended up with, even then, was this very complicated legal system that only few people were expert at. And I do wonder if we're not seeing like potentially the beginnings of that here.
Yeah, and this is the thing that we're one of the big projects that we're focusing the most at Aragon 1 is getting this V1 of the Aragon network with the Aragon Court ready for the end of the year.
Do you think, like, in the Aragon toolkit, though, can, like, say I want a DAO, would I also create a court?
No, you can use the Aragon Court of the network. So the way that it's been designed is that when you have a DAO, you could choose who is your oracle for dispute resolution, and that could be the Aragon Court that the network agrees, like, okay, this is our court, but someone could fork the court and do something else, or just go with a simpler mechanism, which is like, okay, we're gonna get this person or this DAO to decide here. So it's totally possible that people use other oracles, but the Aragon Court will be a good default.
Wow, and it's interesting here because you kind of you're thinking of an oracle, like in this case, is an oracle a jury in a weird way?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, from the DAO's perspective, it just needs, okay, who is like, I just need this entity to tell me what to do, because I cannot resolve this with my code. So yeah, the Aragon Court is a subjective oracle that involves humans and jurors and like an appeals process to get to a final ruling. But at the end of the day, it's like a jury oracle. Yeah.
Do you have another example of sort of a way that a DAO could be gamed? And then maybe we could even it would be interesting to see how would that be used? How would that go through the system up to the court? Just like for me to understand that even a little better.
Yeah. So in terms of the court, this 51% tag protection, or making sure that organizations stick to their manifesto, that's the main use case for the court right now.
But what if it was something like, okay, so another way that I've heard DAOs could be gamed is like, say, a malicious whale. Mm-hmm. Instead of like putting the idea, oh, if you vote for me, I will give you tokens. What if a malicious whale, or just like a whale who's super pissed at some group of people, and they're asking for funding, and a malicious whale jumps on board, buys a bunch of ant, votes against a proposal to fund that group that they don't like. And and it's super obvious to everybody. Could there be, would that ever hit a court? Because to me, that's a bit of an attack.
I mean, in that case, what I would say is that they should, if the network was did want to make that happen, then it should be voted again. And some people that didn't show up to vote, they should go and vote. But the thing that we're really solving with the court is avoiding invalid proposals per the organization's rules or values. Like if we have an organization that is gonna fund open source work on Aragon, and someone submits a proposal to, I don't know, like build a gambling game on Tron, that thing shouldn't, like, even if there's like a Tron whale in the DAO that really wants it to happen and has 51% of the tokens, the way that the court protects you is that proposal doesn't even get voted on, or like someone can stop the voting and say, okay, even if you have 51% of the tokens, we have these rules in the organization that we're not gonna even like entertain the idea of doing this. So that's really what the court is protecting, like not making bad proposals pass. But if like a whale buys a bunch of tokens and the network still wants to do that, but they didn't show up to vote, they should submit it again and do show up to vote.
And then what I guess you get there is you do get this idea of like lobbyists almost. Like I know these terms are super loaded and we don't like them, but you do get these, advocates for certain proposals, and some of their job, I guess, would be to go around to whales or to large holders and like rally them to this cause. Yeah.
And we've kind of heard that this has happened in some contentious AGPs that there were in the past, or when teams were getting funding. But yeah, I think that's okay. And like these whales at the end of the day are heavily involved in the ecosystem, and they should have a say. And this, I believe that voting will get way more participation once we release the delegation, so that people can delegate to, if they want to be a more passive holder in the DAO, they can say, okay, I want this person to vote for me, or this other DAO even, and then they delegate their vote. And if at some point they don't agree with whatever they're voting, then they can like overrule the vote, or even like take the delegation back. So I think that will improve a lot, because for some big holders, they're just taking the tokens out of custody and cold storage. It's just a big hassle for voting in some AGPs. Like sometimes when there have been important AGPs, some people have done that, but it would be easier to just keep the tokens in cold storage and delegate that to either a holder key that they have, or to an organization that they know will vote in their best interests.
Wow. And then you have representatives.
Yeah.
And soon there'll be like a little council, maybe a parliament. But it's interesting that it's kind of getting to that point. Do you feel like as time goes on, you're going to see more and more of these kind of cases emerge, and there might be some weird cases? And I'm sure you guys are looking back over sort of case studies and thinking of ways to mediate it. But who is like, which of the teams is like working on the ideas? Because here it's, even though I know that there's like a technical switch or something that's created, but really first, before you can create the technical, you need to figure out like what's the system and who's developing that? Like, how do you come up with these ideas for courts or new rules, or
Yeah, so this is a lot of the ideas that we're finishing to implement now. They were in the original white paper that were like in the second white paper that we wrote in early 2017. So yeah, it's like just a lot of discussions with the team on how to make that happen. So in the past, like Aragon 1 has been leading the ideation, research, and development of the Aragon network. But now we're seeing that other teams are also starting their own projects under the Aragon ecosystem, and yeah. So it's kind of in this moment that almost everything that we set out to build is getting to a point that is like almost ready to launch. And now there's a lot of cool, interesting things that people are starting to do and come up with their own projects.
So far, what we've heard is like there's voting. Like, I'm just thinking, what are the mechanisms in DAOs? There's voting, and this is where, like, if you happen to have a lot of tokens and you have more of a vote, if you've taken it out of cold storage and you're willing to participate. Are there any other mechanisms that you guys are exploring where maybe it wouldn't be the amount of tokens, but rather like an individual gets to vote? Is this something that you guys are actually thinking about?
Yeah.
What do you think of that?
Yeah, we've had this support for this actually for a long time. Just that people weren't really using it that way. But I think there's very interesting things to do with reputation. There's this team that is working on integrating this project called SourceGrid that allows you to analyze the get a reputation graph on a project based on contributions to GitHub or Discourse, and they're trying to bridge that back into the DAO so that you have like voting power in relation to what your reputation is, which comes down to how much you are contributing to the project. So I think that's super exciting. And the DAO Zero project, they're leading that, and I'm super excited to see that. And there are more sci-fi governance models like Future Key that I'm super excited that it's getting to a point that we will start seeing experiments with this in the next few months. Actually, for the next AGP, we'll maybe have like a signaling market, a future key market for the AGP that it will have like its own parallel future key vote.
So I don't think we've defined this, but what is future key?
Yeah, so the whole idea of future key is that rather than having people vote for what they think should happen, the organization has like a metric that it's trying to optimize for, and whenever you're faced with a decision, it's just looking at, okay, well, if we went with yes, what do we think the outcome, like this metric, would go to? So a very simple way would be like the price of a token. So we have this decision to make. If we go yes, what is going to be the price of the token in 5 years, or like in 5 months? If we go B, what is going to be the price of the token for this? And then you have like a prediction market on both, and people start betting on how would the outcome of each of the options is, but they're actually not betting on what they think it's better. They're actually putting their money where their mouth is and saying, okay, yeah, I bet that this will be good for the token up to like a 50% increase in price, and they actually have a bet on that.
They're sort of betting on the outcome. They're not betting on what they want necessarily. Yeah,
it's betting on how good the outcome will be for the organization. Yeah.
So what do you think the biggest risk facing DAOs is right now?
Yeah, I think there's an amount of technical risk, and this technology is still being not super old, and so far we haven't seen a big smart contract back in a while, but it's still like pretty nascent technology, and people should be careful with it. But then there's also interesting implications from the legal side. In the moment that you don't have any legal link to the organization, and it's just people like making decisions with an organization that is just running on the blockchain. So yeah, the legal implications about how does this get interpreted in different jurisdictions is very interesting. And also there's like risk of someone creating a DAO for doing something bad, which is definitely possible. Like people using good technology to do bad things, as it's happened with every technology, and that could give the space a bit of a bad reputation.
Yeah, that's actually, I didn't think about that part. With the legal stuff, like that was a question that I've had myself, where it's like, say you are running your organization as a DAO and you've collected funds and you want to distribute those funds, and say it's like you're actually distributing them like pay. How do you, like, it's almost like, how do you declare, maybe as an individual, it's actually not that complicated to declare because you like have an amount of things and there's a service and it's like whatever, you wrote an invoice to somewhere. But like, how does, like that would then, if say you declared your taxes and you include this, cool. You as an individual is great. But this organization that paid you, like it's sort of a link to this thing, and it isn't filing any taxes. So like what happens with that?
Yeah, this is a very interesting question, and this is an idea that we've been kind of working on, but never really got to implementing it. That is this idea of DAO proxies, which are rather than having like a one-to-one relationship with a like having a DAO and a legal entity, having like like companies that can be like service providers for DAOs, so that they could be the entity that invoices for a bunch of DAOs. There's like a lot of very bleeding edge legal work that has to be done here. Like we don't have the expertise in the team right now, but we're actually it's something that the Aragon Association is looking into knowing people that could be interested in working on this, like seeing how we can create these links that are not, okay, we have a DAO and we have a company or a corporation that represents the DAO, which I think it's not really, it kind of misses the point. It's like at that point you're just doing like nicer interfaces for companies, but having like these service providers that you can have these sovereign DAOs and just use them for sending invoices or like owning real estate or something like that. I think that's super interesting, but there's definitely more work needs to be done in this area.
Are there any jurisdictions that are actually working with DAOs or on DAOs? Why did I hear something about like Vermont?
Yeah, no. I haven't heard about that.
Okay.
Yeah, there's like something interesting going on in the state of Wyoming in the US, that they're creating kind of this sandbox for regulatory sandbox for organizations to create there. But I think most of the things that we're seeing are like just maybe recognizing the DAO as a legal entity in those jurisdictions. But yeah, I think we should see it like the way that we should pursue it is that some jurisdictions start seeing them as their own thing and don't try to regulate them or like make them appear as a legal entity there, because the moment that you have a jurisdiction that recognizes you as a legal entity, then okay, you're into the system again.
Yeah. So I found it, by the way. It's DORG. DORG announced in June that it was the first legally established decentralized autonomous organization in U.S. law, and it's a BBLLC, a blockchain-based limited liability company in Vermont. I can put the link in the show notes if somebody's curious. Yeah,
there was actually Ross from the Aragon community that works on OpenESQ that created like I think the first one is one that he created like earlier in the year, like April or May, that created like a New York LLC linked with a DAO, and they have like this way of very easily creating an LLC for your DAO. So I think like as far as I'm aware of, Roses is the OG DAO linked to the real world. But
yeah. Well, it sounds like there's a few more experiments going on at least. But I think you're right, where it's like if you're just linking it right to another company, then you're eventually tapping into the same problems.
Yeah, you're the company with a nicer. Yeah.
Well, it's going to be interesting. What do you think? What's exciting to you right now when you look forward? Like, what do you think? Where can you picture a DAO? What place do you picture it taking in the future?
Yeah, I'm excited to see big DAOs again. I think the DAO, like the 2016 DAO was amazing. Like maybe we got a little too excited too soon, and we threw double digits percentages of the ETH supply to something that was unproven. But I think it was super exciting to see like massive amounts of capital and attention being pulled into an idea, and everyone collaborating to do due diligence for projects and like deciding how the DAO was gonna make a return for everyone, which was like a pretty simple mission that DAO has. Is like we're gonna make investments and make a bunch of money. So I'm excited to see big DAOs like this one that people are. We get the technology to a point that people are not scared, and that it's safe actually to do like a big organization that has like a big goal, and not only a DAO that just we put money inside and it kind of leaks it in the form of grants, but that actually has a mission and a goal to exist for a lot of years, and that involves becoming self-sustainable.
Well, listen, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast and giving me a walk through the Aragon DAO, the setup, and DAOs in general.
Yeah, thanks so much. It was super fun.
And I think there's definitely a lot to take from this. I feel like we do see more and more DAOs popping up around, and I had never really realized the sort of far-reaching implications that having a DAO could have. So this has been really helpful. So thanks a lot.
Yeah, thanks.
And to our listeners, thanks for listening.